Kia ora, friends, family, whānau. Welcome to this podcast. Oh my god, it's episode 2. Holy shit. I'm Tucky, and who are these other two that are with me today?
That is not our intro. Straight up, that is not our intro.
Introduce yourself.
The intro. Vic, go ahead. In there.
Hi, I'm Victoria, and I do not endorse the intro.
Does not endorse.
Hi guys, I'm Lance. I'm the funny one, the cool one, the likable one, and I 100% endorse this intro.
I mean, that's 50-50. I mean, if you count my one, that's a win. That intro is a win right there, guys. Yeah, welcome. Okay, so this is episode 2 now. Obviously, we're gonna try and go for a bit more of a structured approach as opposed to our first episode, which was quite fucking all over the place, but that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked it. Nothing.
I thought you were gonna like add something else, but I liked it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I did like it as well. It was really fun. So this time we've got 2 films that we have watched. Me so recently have just watched, in particular. And so I guess we'll just start cracking on with the first film, which is the great classic North by Northwest, directed by Alfred Hitchcock and written by Ernest Lehman. Boom! See that, Lance? I got the writer, and he was totally correct.
Good stuff.
And it's totally correct.
And it was the right writer this time.
It was the correct writer. You know, I got the director wrong in the last episode too. I was like, holy shit.
Oh my god.
That was so funny.
Shit.
I got it completely wrong. I was just like, well, I'm keeping that in. Anyway, so yeah, we've watched North by Northwest, and it's essentially about a New York City advertising executive who goes on the run after being mistaken for a government agent by a group of foreign spies. Yep, that is the IMDb summary that I've just read out loud, and that's the summary for the film. Yeah, all the research going into that. So this was chosen by our lovely Victoria here, and I guess before we get into the bulk of the discussion, I'm gonna hand it off to Lance, and he can start us off with his, I guess, prior expectations for the film. So, before you started watching it, what were your thoughts? What did you think you were gonna get out of this?
Well, I've heard of North by Northwest before, of course, since it's a pretty well-known film. But yeah, the only thing I've ever really known outside of the film's name and who it was directed by was this crop duster scene that everyone likes to talk about. So I was really excited to see this scene because I'd never seen it before myself, even though a lot of people like to talk about it. So that's what I was kind of excited for the most. But yeah, and I was just wanting to see how it would go. And as soon as I saw the time of 2 hours 16 minutes, I was like, what are they going to do in the 50s with 2 hours and 16 minutes? So let's try that one. And so those are my prior expectations. Let's see how good Hitchcock is. Again, because I've seen Psycho. Yeah, because Psycho's good. So yeah.
Yeah.
I was sure this was really good, and Rope was good too. So I was sure this was going to be good. So yeah, I was excited.
Yeah, I think I was sort of the same as well. When I saw it on Vic's list, I was quite proud. I was like, oh yeah, there you go. And then I saw Vertigo. I was like, oh yeah, I've got Rear Window. Okay, stop. It's just like this is a lot of Hitchcock. Like you, Lance, I'd only seen Psycho and Rope out of all of his films. Psycho because of FTVMS film class, and Rope being one of James's recommendations, I think, back in the day. So yeah, I obviously knew of Hitchcock's prolific filmography, and so I was quite excited about this, and just to see what it was about. I had no idea about the crop duster scene, or even what the film was about. I just know it had something to do with spies, but I didn't really research anything more into it. I was just like, okay, it's North by Northwest, it's a Hitchcock joint, and something to do with spies. Alright, play. Let's get it. And that was essentially, so Vic.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, so why did I choose this? Honestly, I have not seen any of the Hitchcock films. I know who he is, but I wasn't a film student, so I know very little of his reputation or what he's sort of famous for, other than movies. The reason for picking this was actually in a lot of the sort of 50s research that I've done, this film gets mentioned quite a lot as being quite iconic of the time. And I had seen the crop duster scene before, but I didn't recognize it until it actually came up in the film, and I was like, oh, okay, this is like quite well known. So I really only chose it because, one, I knew it had a very good reputation, and two, because I thought it was quite quintessential, I guess, of the era.
So no, that's pretty cool, Vic. Yeah, I sort of assumed that was like gonna be your reason for the bulk of your list. Was just sort of trying to pick up things from those. I mean, not only just that era, but also just ones that are considered classics.
Sort of classics, yeah. Things you should have seen, I guess.
Essentially, yeah. Alright, well, I guess I'm gonna toss it over to Lance with his first impressions. So, like, not, I guess, none of the details, like, how, like, about, story and all that, but just more like your first impressions of the film. We'll go for you, Lance.
Like, yeah, I mean, like, some first impressions, like, for some of the stuff, like, you could definitely see that this was an older film, like, from the green screen and stuff. I thought, yeah, like, that was, yeah, but I understand for the time and stuff, but I think it's pretty good stuff, and yeah, Cary Grant was a good-looking man. Yeah, I think that. And I thought, yeah, I just thought it looked like a typical 50s movie in color.
Yeah, I think first impressions, I wasn't, I wasn't, instantly captivated by it. Mainly because I've noticed with this one and with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and I suppose I should have known this going into it, was like how long it takes to get to the story, which is just like, it's just like it's mainly a product of the time, isn't it? Like, it's that idea of having like almost the full credits right at the start, and like having all of these like visual shots that don't communicate any story. I guess with this one it was just like, I mean, there were cool shots and it was all like going, but then it was like, yeah, I wasn't sure how to feel at first, but as it went on, I enjoyed myself a lot more, and I began to appreciate a lot more of the deeper levels of it, which we'll get into soon. But yeah.
Having not seen any of the Hitchcock things, as I was watching it through for the first time, there were definitely moments where I'm like, that was an odd choice. I think he's known for this, but I'm not sure. So when we get into our deeper dive, I'll definitely have to sort of mention the things I thought were bizarre, but that I think are characteristics of like Hitchcock style of filmmaking. Yeah, I think with the films that we do from the past, we're always going to have to put them in the context of being products of their time. Because it's
especially with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner as
Who's
well.
Coming to Dinner.
That's super important, yeah.
You good, Lance?
Because I was just saying, like, because I feel like when we like doing reviews of this film, because that's what we're doing, like, we're just trying to do it so that people can see, because even though we have to portray for an audience of today, we have to put ourselves in the past. So that's why I think when we come up with like an idea or grade or feeling for the film, I think we have to put ourselves in both minds, like a score or feeling for two minds, because obviously we can't just put ourselves fully in the 50s, because then we don't speak to our audience of today, but we can't fully put ourselves in today because then it's not fair on the film. So I feel like we have to be in a bit of two minds.
I get you. I think the way I'm trying to think about it is like, yeah, you're right. Like, it is a film made in that era, so then we can't hold it up to the same standards as something that we see now. But then I think it's also important to like also see it from the point of view of how does it hold up in terms of like its narrative and like its impact and its emotional effect
I mean,
Yeah.
like,
as well, like today, because like even all those things can like still hold a lot of weight despite being like a film that old, you know what I mean? Like that those
No,
Yeah.
elements can still hold up as well, and like judging
Like-
how that is, I think is important too.
yeah, it could be like things like story and sound.
mm,
100% can still hold up no matter what time you're in.
yeah,
100%
it's
can
really
hold up.
things like visual effects and
Yeah.
cinema, like
Yeah,
the special effects. That's gonna be what shows its age.
yeah,
the
like the
most.
technical fucking
Yeah.
qualities of it,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Speaking of
Yeah,
story,
just-
I guess we can dive into that.
I feel like if this is the first movie that started this kind of person who is, how do I say this, like naive person getting put in a situation that they're not comfortable with or not expected to get in with. Look, I forgot the word. I want to say subgenre, but that's not the word. This situation has been played up so many times in cinema now that it's crazy just how much people have used this, especially this is the first one, and how many times people have used this. I feel like a lot more now it's used more in like buddy cop films where one is like
yeah.
super intense, a cop or something like that, and then the other person's just a nobody off the street, and then they get into these crazy situations. But yeah, so it's just, and I'm feeling like most of this probably started here in this film, which is insane. And so I think, yeah, if we judge it on a story, yeah, it's played out in today's terms, but if we judge it in the 50s, this could be the very first time it ever happened.
Yeah, I kind of want to add on that, Lance, because I don't necessarily think that the original idea with the story was this kind of like I get that there's this basis of naive guy being thrown into a situation that he doesn't really know, but I don't think that was sort of the exact premise they were going for. Like if you look at the time it's made, which is the late 50s, and the idea of, like spies and this kind of stuff, like we're sort of smack bang in the middle of the Cold War between America and Russia. And so like spies and undercover and all this kind of thing was a really popular topic. And so I don't necessarily think Hitchcock was going for the angle of like naive guy gets thrown into like a situation. I think part of the appeal was more, I want to make a movie about, undercover spies and the fact that the government have got things going on, if you get what I mean.
Just to add to that, I think you're sort of both touching on something as well in that, because I think, Lance, you're right. I think there is that trope of a naive guy getting thrust into this situation, and
That's
I
the
think
word.
Vic you're correct as well in that whole idea of the Cold War and this espionage sort of happening throughout the film. It's like essentially this combination of throwing this guy into the espionage of a Cold War, and like being, essentially like against his own free will, pushed into this scenario and trying to figure out a way out. And then I think it's interesting that the story develops in a way that it's like this guy who gets put in this situation and he tries to escape and he's constantly on the run. He encounters a woman who he falls in love with. But then that woman, spoilers for the whole film, turns out to be turns out to be like a spy herself, and it's the sort of like plot device of a double cross, which is also common in a lot of spy films from that era and from today as well. And like I think there's like an interesting combination of those two, like the trope of the naive guy who then has to become like this. He essentially becomes like a spy hero at the end, with the way that they like structure his character arc, I guess.
Yeah. But I think that, like, if we talk about that scene when he's brought back to the house having just been abducted, like, it was quite funny. I don't know if you guys found it funny watching him be
Yeah.
totally ignorant to what the fuck's going
Yes,
on. Like,
yeah.
it was really funny.
That's the point. Like, that's the fucking
Mm.
naivety, and it's the comedy of it. Yeah.
It's the comedy of it, yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Does anyone know if this movie was supposed to be comical? Because some of it, like, was so funny. Like, some of the lines and stuff were, like, great and comical. But I don't know, was the movie
some of
supposed
them
to
were
have comedy?
really funny.
No, I agree.
Does anyone know if the movie was supposed to be comical at all?
I mean, I don't think it was supposed to be a comedy, but with any heavier subject matter, you normally want, like, a lighter tone so that it doesn't get too heavy, you know?
Yeah, but also it's coming from a person, like a director who's known for being the master
known
of
to be very
suspense.
serious. Yeah.
Yeah, no, being the master of suspense, not the master of comedy. You know, so it's almost
Mm.
like, yeah, I think that some of the quote-unquote comedic elements stems from our own sort of like, I guess, our own consumption of past media that sort of overuse all these tropes to the point where, like, this trope is being used now that it's like again, this was probably the first time this was done, or like the earliest time this was done, and so, like, we've seen other films pull this trope in a more comedic way, and so it's like, we associate that comedy with that, I think.
Like, saying that, though, sorry brother, but like, from what I know of the time period, certain things that happen, or he says or she says, like, they are funny for the period, so
That's
there
what
are
I mean,
definitely
For the
lighter
period.
moments in there.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
like, at the time, though, was it made to be light for the time?
Yeah, like, there were I don't know if it was, I think it definitely, there's jokes in there that would have hit in the 50s, so, like, I think there's definitely deliberately some lighter elements to it. Because if you notice, like, they don't show a lot of death or murder in a way that's particularly gruesome or anything.
No, they don't. Like, Psycho was the first film to ever show a toilet bowl. Like, they never even showed a toilet on screen until Psycho was shown. There's a lot of things that, like, wasn't shown back then, like death, and because mainly that was, like, against, like, I forget what it's called now, but it's like the whole, like, the film code of conduct or something.
Code of conduct, yeah.
Something like that. That's probably not what it is, but it's something of that nature where it's like, you can't show this, and, like, films those days had to be more implicit with how they showed things.
I still feel that it's not particularly, like, gruesome, and they don't show particularly horrible things or imply particularly horrible things. Like, it is kept fairly light.
I think. Like, is this where we talk about scenes and dialogue as well?
Yeah, if you want to.
Yeah.
Like, is this the
We're talking about the script.
Like,
Yeah.
The script.
The script.
Like, one thing for the gruesomeness and one thing for the comedy, just real quick. For gruesomeness, I thought that knife scene was pretty gruesome for the time. The one way they threw the knife into the back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he pulled it out and there's zero blood.
Well, that's the thing, because back then they couldn't show stuff.
They couldn't show the blood.
But I still thought that was pretty intense for the 50s. I was like, oh shit.
No, I agree, bro, because, like, the subject matter is not light. You know, even though it's being shown, like, I agree, like, when guys get shot, it's like, well, there's no blood. Even though there was, like, a fake gun in there, which kind of saves that. But yeah, it's like a fucking knife scene. And, like, I actually laughed because of how he pulled it out so dramatically.
Yeah, I know.
And then they're like, oh my god, he did it! And I'm just like, well, of course, he pulled it out, like, as if he just stabbed him. And he's just like, no, it wasn't me, and drops it and runs. I was like, that's fucking convincing, mate. Yeah, sure.
No, but, like, I don't know, that scene did make me crack up a lot, but for some reason, the one scene that made me crack up, that I'm sure was a comedy scene, like, I'm sure it was a comedy line, was when he was just looking at... no, that was...
Okay, no, you go.
No, like, when we at Mount Rushmore, and he's just, like, taking, like, a gander with his telescope, and he's like, I don't like the way Teddy Roosevelt is looking at me.
Oh, yeah, that's so funny.
Okay, that's comedy. Yeah.
Like, it was deliberately meant to be funny.
I just died. I just died at that scene,
Yeah.
and I was like, "What are you doing? This movie took a turn." But no,
Oh,
that auction scene, and just like the
Oh,
way
the
she
auction
fucking
scene,
behaved,
yeah.
auction
just
scene.
like especially in the train as well, when she's just like trying to send away the cops, and just how they were talking to each other, and it was just
yeah,
Yeah.
saucy. So yeah, I
it
mean,
was-
like, in terms of like, yeah, the fucking auction scene was so funny.
Oh my god, the
Just-
auction scene's hilarious.
Just with
I-
how like he, yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, so on like a side note, but I've seen, I watched a little while ago, Singing in the Rain, which I think is 56, and
Yep, that
I was
was a
surprised.
film class film. Yep.
Yeah, I was surprised how well the humor translates. Like, I did not think that something funny almost 70 years ago would still be funny. You know, like if you take like
comedy can be timeless.
yeah, comedy can be timeless, but like especially with the auction scene, like that was hilarious. And I did not think that, you know, like people like us who've obviously grown up and not really experienced an auction because they're not hugely popular like they were anymore, or they're mostly online.
Unless you watch
like,
The Block or something.
Yeah, but you know, like I didn't
Yeah.
expect that humor, a lot of the humor that came across to be so funny, and it really was, and it was quite surprising.
Yeah, yeah.
But Vic, like, yeah, as you said, comedy translates. Like, one of my top 10 favorite comedy movies of all time is Marilyn Monroe's Some Like It Hot.
Some Like It Hot, yeah.
So
Like
funny.
Which
was
was on my bigger list that I had to cut out because it wouldn't fit in 10. So
yeah, we both watched it in film class anyway.
Yeah,
but
we
that
watched it
was-
in film class.
I thought
Yeah,
that was a crack up.
I thought that was
Yeah.
crack up too. Yeah. I thought that the character arc for, was it Roger Thornhill? Is that his name?
yeah.
Yeah,
think
I thought it was an interesting approach for a character, at least of that time, because I think I've already like talked about where he starts and where he ends. The ending was really funny too. I found that was so sudden. The Jews, like as he's just like grabbing her out, he's like, "Oh, on the train." The end. It's like, what? Like I know
What
what
a
he was
joke.
trying to do, but like, why did you do it that way? And like, yeah, I mean, who am I to question a genius like Alfred Hitchcock? But
yeah.
I liked the relationship
Oh,
between.
it's Roger. Yeah, it is Roger. You're good.
I liked the relationship between Roger and I forget the lady's name.
Ava.
Ava,
Eve Kendall.
Eve Kendall,
Yeah,
yes.
Eve Kendall.
Because I mean, I didn't know what, I didn't know what was going to happen in the film. I didn't expect that to be a thing. I sort of did find it predictable that she was going to be involved in the spy stuff. But I think that's just because of the ways in which I've come to expect those kind of twists from other films. Like,
okay, yeah.
like, cause it's like, cause the way that they were like doing it, it's like, oh yeah, I was like, oh, I wonder if this is where, like, she's gonna be revealed to be, like, the villain the whole time, or like, being working with the villain. Because also the other thing too was that I was like, okay, this is a Hitchcock film. He's the one that created all of the plot twists that were ever made in life, So like,
He's the genius.
so like by the like even like fucking the director of Parasite like pays homage to him as like he inspired me, blah blah blah. So I'm like, well shit, every twist in the world is all Hitchcock,
Yeah.
So
there
like,
is no twist without Hitchcock. Yeah.
there is no Twitchcock. That's what he is. Twitchcock. Oh, that sounds wrong. It's like he's got a twitchy penis.
Yeah. Anyway.
Anyway, we're gonna keep that in.
Yeah.
Yeah, nah. So like, I thought it's hard to judge. I think for me, it's hard to judge like performances from this time era because their acting. Like, there's two modes of acting that I can instantly recognize, or at least that I can identify, which is film acting and theater acting. And so, like, with theater acting, like, they're often told to overact, it's because of the ways that, like, a play operates and how
Mm.
an audience is meant to, how they're meant to like consume like the content of the play, and how they're meant to read the actor's performance and their emotions. They have to overact so that the audience can clearly understand how they're feeling in the scene or what emotions they're trying to portray. And with film now, there's ways in which you can do that very subtly and with nuance, so that all you need to do is like cut to a close-up, and then you can see that he's really angry about this one thing, or like you can see that she's afraid by this one cut here and just the way she looks. And I've always felt like with films from this era, they're trying to like they're gradually getting into that mode, like from the theater mode into the film mode, or at least the film mode that we know now. And so like yeah, for me it's always been difficult to judge like performance, like in terms of like a film, you know. Do you guys agree or like disagree or like what?
Yeah, no, I think this comes into being a product of its time. Like really, films back then, this was the acting that was expected.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
So, like,
but in saying that,
it's on brand.
yeah, no, I agree. But in saying that, I don't think it takes away from anything. It's just I think for me, it's like something to readjust yourself with. I think I have the same thing with like Asian cinema and anime, because the way that you watch anime is not the way that you watch
different.
other things. Yeah, there's like
'Cause everyone
cultural and
overreacting
trope
on it.
things. Yeah, well, no, it's just like these certain little character tropes and the way people talk and behave. It's stuff that is acceptable in anime, but not acceptable in anything else.
That isn't acceptable.
Yeah.
Like the bloody nose trope or something like that.
Yeah, that means they're horny.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like if we're talking just on that kind of like you have to see it differently. I remember when Yumi and a friend went to see Weathering with You. And he already knows what I'm going to say. And anime has this trope of occasionally just playing this very over dramatic music.
Yeah.
And you and I obviously were used to that form and that style, so we were totally fine by it. But our friend sniggered every time it happened because obviously he was not used to the way animes work in comparison.
Yes.
Yeah, so definitely I can tell that like it's a different mindset watching this stuff.
Yeah, it's a totally different mindset.
Yeah.
That happens in Hindi films as well, where they just play dramatic music after a scene, and it just goes on. Now, like, is there any other scene? Like, I mean, the crop duster scene. Like, this.
I was gonna
are we
say.
gonna talk about that?
No, yes, we have to, because that scene was like my favorite scene in the whole film, and I did not see it coming because I did not know about it. Like when I was watching it, right? Like how. Like he got off the train? Is that when it? Yeah, he got off the train, and then he.
Yeah, he got off the train.
And then he was on the bus, got off the bus, and it's the middle of nowhere, and it's this long fucking wide shot of just this empty desert, and it's him. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And then it's just like a very long scene where it's just the car comes. Oh no, that's not who I'm seeing. Oh, car comes. Oh, that's not who I'm seeing. There's another car. Oh, a guy comes out. Hey, are you meeting? No, I'm waiting for the bus. Oh, okay. But I like how it's paced out, because the way that it's paced out, it's like you can it's communicating how empty the space is and how long it takes for anyone to show up. So it's like as soon as the crop duster comes and it starts shooting him, it's like oh fuck, like there's no help, because it's established like the emptiness and the isolation of the geography, that it's like holy shit, like he like that. I thought that was really like powerful to like set up, and then when it started to pay off, the whole crop duster coming to try and kill him, and then it's like it was like literal desperation that and like you know I guess ironic timing that truck came at the perfect time for him to like get out to escape. Yeah. So that was like my favorite scene, like from start to finish, because when it was starting, that was like one of the few times where I'm like, okay, where's this going? What's happening? Like he's gonna meet someone and it's gonna end up like this? Like, what is this?
Yeah, it was a really good subversion of what you thought was about to happen, eh?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it set it up so perfectly that it was like, oh shit, like you could actually feel the tension, you know? And that
Actually,
suspense.
there's two other things that I really liked about it. One was that as the other guy that he meets gets on the bus, just before he does, he says, "That's odd. They're dusting crops, but there's no crops over there."
Yes.
And it sets up this sort of, okay.
The setup.
But then also having that truck explode, like, really started to amp up the stakes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know? Because, like, you've sort of felt as you've gone through up until this point that, like, he's not going to die, you know? Like, he's been threatened, but he's going to survive. And then when this happens, you're sort of like, oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I agree, yeah. Man, what a scene. You have anything to add for the scene, Lance?
No, I'd say I think it lived up to my expectations. The scene, it was really good. I think I enjoyed it a lot, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, like, along with that line, in terms of, like, the, like, overall cinematography and, like, the locations I thought were really interesting, because it felt like the movie, like, there wasn't any two locations that felt the same to me, which I thought was really, like, like it was good, because then it, like, showed off how the, like, you know, how much money they put into, like, production design and, like, creating these unique, like, set pieces, and it really felt like because, like, it just felt like every scene and every sequence had, like, its own location, its own sort of feel to it, you know? And yeah, I really appreciated that. And with, like, I guess, the cinematography, because there's this thing that a lot of directors do, and especially in this, and, like, not only back then, but also now, is that they'll try and create shapes in the frame. Like, there's a lot of shots in this film that I noticed, like, I think it was near the beginning and, like, in the middle, where, like, they'll place characters in certain positions to, like, create a shape. So, like, in the scene, I think it's the beginning before he gets kidnapped, like, there's a lot of triangles, and that's essentially, like, composed by having, like, Roger and, like, the bottom of the screen, and have the two people he's talking to on the top right, top left, and that creates this, like, triangle, and it's, like, because he's in the middle, like, it draws your eye to him, and because he's, like, so small in the frame, it's like he's got the smaller, like, he's lesser powered, like, it communicates, like, power dynamics as well, like, that those two characters, like, have the upper hand on him, and he's, like, this small guy in the frame. You know, there was, like, stuff like that I noticed, like, near the beginning, and, like, some parts in the middle where he would create some shapes and lines and stuff like that. So I thought that was cool. But yeah, no, like, that's something you can look out for, like, future viewings.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, something I noticed, like, right in the beginning, as we're going over the credits, they use the same roll of footage twice, so it repeats. Which I found very odd, because I feel like there's some significance or something to that, but I have no idea what it is, frankly.
What roll of footage are you referring to?
Just at the beginning, when they have, like, all the people rushing in and out of the buildings. Yeah, he shows one of those clips twice.
Like, at the beginning?
At the very beginning, yeah, the footage, like, plays twice, and I was like, okay, that's a very odd choice to, like, have twice.
Remember that guy? He was probably setting up a plot twist, man. You never know.
Like, I don't think it's that.
They're expecting a new scene? No, I'm gonna play the same one again. Got him. Boom.
Like, I didn't know if this was, like, a Hitchcock thing, or if they just fucked up, but, like, yeah, I was really sort of immediately confused by the fact that this same brief shot repeats, and I was like, okay, that was an odd thing to do.
Vic wants to talk about some performances, don't you, Vic?
I was just going to put sort of characterization in there as well, because it feeds on from an interesting conversation we had the last podcast, which I sort of wanted to bring up and bring in.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, like I found Roger's characterization really interesting because, and I guess this sort of fits into the time period, but he's always a man of principle throughout the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's on the run, but he stops for a shave. You know, he was in the train scene when he has to leave because the cops are coming. He gets up from his meal and still pays for it before he runs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like when we had our last podcast and we were talking about Victoria and, you know, the idea of a good person doing a bad thing, you kind of get that. Yeah, you had that scene with her in the sort of dairy or the co-op grabbing the stuff.
You're
and
talking
then she
about
steals
Victoria,
something
right?
extra.
So for
I'm talking about
people,
Victoria, yeah.
for people who hadn't seen the last episode, she's talking about Victoria, the 2015
Yeah.
German film by Sebastian
Yes.
Schapper. Not even Schapper. That's wrong. Continue.
But yeah, like we were talking about, like I think I commented on that podcast about the fact that if she'd stopped and gone and put the money for the beers on the counter, that kind of would have implied more that, oh, she's a good person, she's just done a bad thing. And so you get that with this film where, despite the fact that he's always on the run, he's constantly paying for the services he uses. You know, like he never puts anybody else out, even though he's on the run.
Yeah.
Which I found quite interesting.
I think that's also, like, case in point that it's a product of the time because, like, when you're trying to create a sympathetic character, like, you've got to give them qualities that the audience is going to latch onto and be like, yep, he's a good guy. Like, with Victoria 2015, I don't think that was the intention. Like, I don't think the intention was to make Victoria look like a standard citizen. It was more to create this gradual transition of, like, you know, her doing more, like, criminalistic things for, like, the thrill of it. But no, I agree with, like, Roger. He sort of keeps this, because he's essentially the good guy of the film, right? And it's like he's the obvious character that we have to align with or, like, agree with, and we're taking his side, right? So I think if they were to take the Victoria approach and have him be more morally ambiguous, I think that would have ruined, like, that alignment with the audience. Like, I don't think the audience would have aligned with him as closely as they did in the same way. Yeah. So I think that is an interesting point to bring up too, because that's, again, I think that's just like a byproduct of how filmmakers were trying to get their audience to align with their main character.
Yeah. It's the cult. Yeah. You need an all-American hero.
Yes, I found especially, like, talking about product of its time and characterization, when Eve Kendall sits down with him and he's saying, you know, introduce yourself, and she goes, well, I'm this and I'm 26 and unmarried, and that's all you need to know about me. And I was like, oh yes, a product of its time. 26 and unmarried.
Did she say she was married or unmarried?
She says, I'm Eve Kendall, I'm 26 and I'm unmarried, and that should tell you everything you need to know about me. And I was like, oh yes, because that was scandalous back then, you know, like, ooh.
Very scandalous.
In terms of characterization, like, it says a lot more about her character for the time period than it ever would today.
Well,
you know?
but that's also interesting you say that, because she's a spy. So that entire thing that she says about herself is a lie. Right?
I think it's more like what it implies if you look at it from a 50s perspective. Because, like, the way she said it to me, like, from a 50s perspective implies that, like, she's done some stupid shit, or she just, you know, she's made some poor decisions, is sort of what I think she's trying to imply.
Yeah.
You know, and that comes back up later on, I think in the forest after she's pretended to shoot him, where it's like, you know, men like you are the reason that, I might have been on the train, but, like, men like you are the reason that girls like me aren't married. You know, this whole sort of, like, we get used and then sort of left. And that's the way she sort of sets up her character.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, she's, I don't know how to think about her character, because, again, it's like, she doesn't, like, she's positioned as a sort of damsel.
In the
Quite a
beginning,
lot.
definitely.
Well, in the end as well, she's like going to
Yeah.
the plane. She's turning around. She's like, "Where is he?" Like, you know. And I'm just like, "But aren't you like the spy?" And like, he's not the spy. Like, he's a random dude.
You-
So why are you looking at him? But it's also like, in that time, it's like, I don't know if this is controversial to say, but it's almost like back then it was like, oh, women can't save themselves. Which
Yeah,
is,
there's definitely a lot of that comes through at certain points.
yeah. Which again
Yeah.
is sort of this product of its time kind of thing. I feel like that's going to be the key word for the week, folks.
Yeah,
The
probably
key
will.
phrase, product of its time. Yeah.
Product of its time. Yeah, there are
Institutionalized racism, product of its time. Misogyny and sexism, oh, it's product of its time, mate. That's what it is.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think in this film, like, in terms of like the sexism and stuff, obviously you'd expect it a little bit in the 50s, but I would say in terms of this time, some of this is pretty progressive, like a woman spy and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. And even liberal for the guy who's been divorced twice. And it's scandal even then to get divorced.
I think like in terms of like their occupation and position, I think you're right. There is that like step of progression, but in terms of narrative storytelling, the woman is still in like she's the love interest. Like the weaker, she's the love interest. Like she's used as a way to trick Roger into, you know, like getting captured. She's used by the main villain. She's used by the fucking agency that put her in that position. She's just used by everyone. And so
she is used by everyone.
By every like character almost. So it's like it's an interesting like way to like look at how this film treats its characters, especially like when you compare like Roger and Eve. So yeah.
I'm so happy I came to speak to you guys. I was gonna hail this movie as like progressive for the 50s. Thanks guys for talking to me about that. Now I think of it in a different level.
I think like the idea of him being twice divorced is just sort of character development. You know, like I think at the very beginning you're supposed to get this idea of the kind of man who's been married to his job.
Yeah, you know? Yeah. And like he's like, yeah, it's isn't it that like idea of like the working man and he's career focused and he's got all this to be sort of like I guess whittled down and like to having like almost nothing basically. And then like at the end it's sort of like his goal sort of changes from being about his like job to like this person, you know? Like cuz then like near the end of the film he's got like this out. It's like, you know, yeah, you've done what you needed to, now you can leave. And he's like, no, but what about her? And so I think that's like important because he gets put in this situation unwillingly and he's trying to escape the whole time. But then once he has this relationship with this woman and then he starts to, you know, fall in love with her, and then he's given this escape and then now he doesn't want to take it. So I think that's like an interesting like flip that they did, and I was convinced by it when I was watching it. And like the twists like near the end I thought were really well done with I forget the guy's name, but basically the villain and his little henchman guy. Is Leonard the henchman guy? Who's the villain?
I don't know which one was Leonard.
I thought Leonard was the guy. Yeah, it's a name, but like how Leonard has this whole conversation with the boss. I don't know. Someone needs to Google this. But how they're having that conversation in the lounge, and then like Roger's outside, and then he sees like the henchman pull out the gun, and it's like, holy shit, he's gonna kill him. This is like a big betrayal, and it's like building up that he's gonna kill him, and it's this thing, and then he shoots him, but then it's this big twist that this whole thing was to show him the gun was fake. She's a traitor.
Yeah.
So it's like instead of him becoming the traitor, he's like demonstrated his loyalty even stronger by ousting the real traitor, and I thought that was like quite a clever way to like build all that up
Do the reveal.
and do the reveal. Yeah, like subvert it all. So that was
I
cool.
really like that gun then comes into play again, because when Roger gets held up by the housemaid,
The maid, yeah.
and he comes out and she's like, "Why were you so late?" And he was like, "I forgot it was your goddamn gun."
Yeah.
Because of course she had the gun with the blanks in it.
Yeah, which I like
Yeah.
watched it and I was like, yeah, but also you saw him shoot it like a couple minutes ago. So like that was my like thinking about it, because like when I saw it I was like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, that makes
okay.
sense, and I was like, oh but hang on, you just saw him, like you forgot that quickly.
I
Yeah.
don't think she was in the room when he shot him, in fairness. So like
Who's this?
the maid, the house.
Oh no,
lady.
she would have thought it was real.
Housekeeper.
Because
Yeah.
she wasn't in the room. She would have thought it was real, but then I thought Roger would have known it was fake.
I think that's just like the reaction to having somebody pull a gun on you, though. You know, like.
That is true. That is true. Like I did know, like when it happened, I bought it, but then I thought about it again, and I was like, because it was like, oh, it took me a while to figure out it was your gun. I was like, yeah, okay, in the moment, I guess, you know. But at the same time, like you've just seen this gun get shot.
Yeah.
So like, but you know, it's not like a big thing. Like it's like a small little nitpick, and it's like,
Yeah.
I think it works because at the end he does get out of there, and he does say, hey. Like, I forgot it was your gun, so she had me pinned down until I remembered. I don't know, but yeah, that was that. And then again, the fucking no, sorry, Lance, you go.
No, I'm saying I know some of the effects because of the time weren't that great and stuff, but did it pull you out in any way? Like I know for the final scene, the Mount Rushmore scene with Mount Rushmore in the background, did it hurt the film in any way for you guys, or were you guys okay? Were you guys immersed enough that you didn't notice that Mount Rushmore was not really good?
I hardly noticed that it was fake, so no. But I have watched a few more old films than I guess you guys have. Maybe I don't know.
I agree with Vic. I agree with Vic because by the time I got to that point, I was already like within the world of the film. And so I was already immersed with how the film looked, and so my brain was able to adjust to like that suspension of disbelief that that's Mount Rushmore, and then it's similar to how like the acting is, like you watch it long enough and you get adjusted with the acting, you get adjusted with the VFX. Sometimes like. During the scene where they're like, when he's driving drunk, I was like, wow, okay. Just the way they're driving, it's like, yeah, wow, okay, yep. You know, things like that like sort of pop up occasionally, but like, yeah, by the time, and that was like in the start of the film too, but like by the time it gets to that point, like I'm already in it. Which I think is more, it says more about like the story and like, you know, because it's able to like, grab you that much that you're just in it. Did you feel the same, Lance, or you like on a different thing?
No, I was pretty much, pretty much guy. I was just wondering, like the first time I saw it, I was like, I wonder if these guys are gonna be affected by this, because I've seen a few old movies in my time, like especially the original Christmas Carol and Some Like Her, of course, being two of my favorite films, and they're both old. But they're also both black and white, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only. Oh, sorry, Lance.
I'm saying so I didn't really mind the effects too much, but I couldn't help wondering at some points. I was like, well, these guys mind. So yeah.
You know, I'm going to be honest. The only time with both the films we're talking about that I sort of snapped out of it was whenever they're driving.
Yeah,
Just because it's so obvious that it's a green screen.
Yes, that's what I mean about the drunk driving too, and the way they're like, just their hands are moving and they're like sit up straight.
Yeah.
Like there's no like moving like left to right. It's just like we're sitting straight and we're in this intense chase.
Yeah.
And like I'm drunk and I'm kind of like swiveling left and right, you know, but I'm not really. Yeah.
That's probably the only time where the immersion was really ruined for me.
Yeah, but it
Just
happened
because
so
it does
early in
look
the
so
film.
odd.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, Roger has to be the most sharply dressed man on the run I've ever seen.
He just dresses so well.
Like, yeah, he's... Like, that was kind of my point about his characterization. Like, once they got off the train, she goes to make the phone call, he decides to have a shave. Like, you're on the run from the law, and your priority is...
The only time I ever saw him dirty was, like, when he went to the hotel after the crop duster scene.
Crop
Because you
duster.
can still see
And then
the
he
dirt on
orders his suit to get cleaned as well.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like
This man has his priorities.
He's like,
The suit
you're
better
on the
be
run
clean.
from the law, but I better get my suit pressed because...
Interesting choice, I think.
I think it plays into his characterization really well, and also, like, again, the sort of expectations and standards of the time. But yeah, it did sort of set his character up as... It almost put him weirdly in control in some ways. You know, like, his character, I think, probably would have been more flustered, but he's, you know, like,
and I think
reserved still. Yeah,
and I think that's sort of, like, that character's way of trying to maintain control, because everything else is so out of control that it's like, okay, I need to do this so that I still feel the semblance of agency, and therefore, you know, I think that could be like his way of like coping with the situation, because it's all pretty fucked from the get-go.
I think the only thing I'll mention is I expected, I guess I didn't really look at the runtime, but I expected it to be a little bit faster paced, whereas it really is quite like a slow burn up to a quite large climax.
I do think like the movie is a little too long.
Yeah.
I feel like they could have probably done
the
same stuff.
Actually,
I shortened down some stuff.
Yeah. No, I agree,
so,
because I was about that's one thing I did actually see, was that there was a lot of him like getting into a scene and then exiting the scene, if that makes sense. Like he'll like go from point A to point B, and it'll run across the screen in a wide shot, and like that happens so much, and I'm like, I kind of get why they did it, and it's like, again, it's product of the time, and it's like, you know, there was many ways that they could have just communicated that in like 2 quick shots. I think I'm being very like super unjustifiably nitpicky, because that's just how it was made, but yeah, I thought they could have cut down so much from just the scenes of him like running into like a scene, or like going into a room and then trying to hide, or like, you know, all that sort of stuff. That's probably about it for me, I think. So I guess we can move on to the grades. And we're gonna start with Mrs.
Vic,
saw them twice.
The person who chose it.
They were so nice. Yeah, the person that chose the film.
Oh gosh, I really don't know how to grade this.
That's
like
not boys.
I have a prediction for the score.
I would watch. Alright, well, you can tell me in a moment, Lance, if you get it right. I definitely would watch it again. I think it was really good, but I don't think it was so groundbreaking. Maybe again, because there's been so many things like it. So I think it's gonna get a solid 7 from me. Lance, what was your thought?
I was on 2 minds for a long time, and I had it written down as a grade for 2 minds as well. And I was going to let this really decide which grade I gave it. And this conversation has really helped me give it a grade. I have decided on the absolute highest 7 you can give without it being an 8.
The highest 7 you can give without it being an 8. Just, that's your
Closer
way of
to
saying...
an 8 than a 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. Way closer to an 8 than a 6. But yeah, I was going to give the lowest 8 possible, but I'm going to give it a 7. I think.
I'm going to go against both of yous, and I'm going to give it an 8.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
What's the
Because
rounded score, Vic? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Well, I mean, like, majority rules it's a 7, but
Yeah.
all right, well that's a 7 to North by Northwest. Nice.
I still think it is deserving, though, of its place in film history, though, and the way
Yeah.
Oh
it's
yeah,
designed
for
as
sure.
well.
That
Yeah.
that crop duster scene is quite fantastic.
And I know I'm gonna see references to that all the time now. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is the next film. This one was chosen by our dear Lancelot. Oh my gosh. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? It's Lance. So I guess I'll just start this off with my prior expectations. So I didn't know what this film was when you chose it. I just saw it as, I guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Oh, okay. Did a quick Google search of it, looked it up on IMDb, and like when I saw actually now that I fucking say that, what is this film about? Well, I looked it up on IMDb, and it says a couple's attitudes are challenged when their daughter introduces them to her African American fiance. And I also saw like a little paragraph talking about the implications of interracial relationships, and I just thought, oh yeah, this is a Lance film. This is such a Lance film. Interracial couples, let's get it, boy. So I was like, okay, so I'm expecting awkward comedy, a little bit of drama because of the subject, and I was mainly expecting a bit more of a, I think throughout the film, a lighter tone with some of these more emotional points throughout. That's what I was expecting, like before going into it, like based on what I had read and what I assumed the film was going to be. So yeah, Vic.
So all the films on the list that aren't mine, I don't bother to look up anything about them before I watch them because I want to go in with hopefully an entirely blank perspective, which is going to make my section of prior expectations very boring. So yeah, I literally had no idea what Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was about, and I honestly expected it to be more of a comedy, I guess, just based on the title.
Yep.
But that's pretty much all I knew about it going in.
And that's fair.
So Lance.
Why did I choose the film? I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a film I really enjoyed. Like back when I was still doing stuff on like checking, when I was like looking at Oscar stuff, when I was very into like who won awards and stuff, I saw this and I was looking at what movies would interest me, and I saw this movie. They won 2 Oscars and got the nomination for Best Picture, and I was like, oh, that's right up my street. That movie's right up my street. And I watched it, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I was like, I haven't seen that film in like 4 years. And I was like, well, I have a list, and I would love my friends to see that, so why not?
Yeah.
And of course, it's important for its time. It's a very important movie in history. And Sidney Poitier, the main actor, is one of the greatest African American actors of all time in terms of history, and one of the most decorated. So that's quite important as well. So yeah, it has a big star, especially at that time, one of the biggest stars. So I felt it was very, very important, and I thought it was a good pick.
No, I agree with it. I think it is a quite a good pick. Like for me, when I first watched it, I was getting a lot of, I got some Get Out vibes when I was watching it, and I know only Lance will understand that.
Yeah.
And it's very much like, I feel like Get Out takes a lot of inspiration from this, at least in the way that it sets up. Like just that sort of idea of like bringing your partner into like your family space, and having that like the partner being, I guess, anxious about, you know, like, oh, I'm an African American man, like they're not gonna approve of me, and then the partner being, no, don't be silly, like of course they're gonna love you, and then of course shock horror they don't, and then it creates this sort of awkward tension and build up throughout the thing. So there was, obviously, for those who have seen it, Get Out is not exactly like that, but in terms of how characters are like introduced and how you're thrust into this world of like where the tension is between this interracial couple, like I think that was like the first impression I got from it was that. But obviously I wasn't expecting all the other horror shit that was gonna turn up, obviously. And you know, like when the music kicked in at the start, and it was very on the nose with like the lyrics and like the visuals, but it was on the nose in a way that it wasn't like I felt like it fit with what it was trying to do. So it's like, oh, okay. And then so you're watching it, and then it sort of starts, and then just this obvious. Like, they're walking through the airport and you see all of the faces just turn watching them. Just with this disapproval, like, oh, like, they're interracial. This is a no-no. And of course with, like, interracial marriage being, like, illegal back in the day in, like, several states, it was sort of, like, this poignant thing that, like, added more weight to it because it was, like, very serious. It was, like, a crime. So, you know, I was pretty taken aback by that, and then, yeah, that was my first impressions of it.
Yeah, so my first impressions, I started the film and we got the intro, and it was, the theme song for this is so upbeat and kind of cheesy.
Very much,
and then,
yes.
Yeah, and then we get the first shot of like the two of them coming off the plane, and I'm just sat there thinking, could Lance have picked a more Lance film? Like, I didn't know that it was possible to put Lance's personality into a film.
I felt the same way. It really was a Lance film. I was just like, bro, this guy's Lance. And this girl is Brooke. No, I'm kidding.
Like, I was just like, I did not know that there was such like a imperfect embodiment of Lance.
Oh, it really was, dude.
In film.
Oh my god.
Yeah, like it was cheesy, and it's like obviously like sort of a rom-com kind of thing at the beginning, and I was like, oh my gosh, here we go.
Yeah.
So that sort of like, I remember I was watching it on the bus and I started laughing and I had to stop because people was looking at me funny, and so I'm just like, oh my god, it's such a Lance film. Yeah, I've got a list of details, but I'll go into them later. The only thing I will say about kind of like the first watch through of it, at the end when the dad gives the big speech, and I guess
you mean when he summarizes the whole film?
Yes, like I really wanted, and maybe this says a lot about me, but I really wanted him to just be like, nah, you can't get married. Like, I really wanted the ending to be like, nah, screw you.
Okay, Hitchcock. Enough of your twists.
No more plot twists. None of that.
Could you imagine that being the plot twist of the film? And the black dad gets up and said, nah, fuck you.
Like, that's sort of what I wanted, though, was just him to be like, I've thought about it, and nah, you know? Like, it was pretty obvious that wasn't where it was going to go.
Obviously,
I was like,
yeah.
Come on, just ruin the whole thing, just...
But yeah, Lance, I guess you've already seen this film, but like, I guess if you wanted to say how you first saw it, what were your like... Obviously it affected you in a major way, right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, obviously at the start I was like, this is upbeat, this stuff. I was like, yo, maybe first. When I first watched, I was like, oh, they haven't talked about Get Set. I mean, Annie Hall is this big starter of romantic comedies, really, in this top way or whatever. But then I'm like, oh, yes, guests are coming to dinner. Look at it. And then, obviously, as we know, the theme changes a bit, and it changes less from a rom-com and into something a bit different. So, yeah, that's my first impression. It's like the first, like, embodiment of rom-com as we know it today. Because I would say something like, maybe, like, again, like I said earlier, like, Something Like It Hot, I would say, is probably one of the first rom-coms, but I just feel like it's not done. It's a rom-com that's done in a different way.
Well,
it's more an old rom-com.
Yeah, with Some Like It Hot, it sort of turns into like a rom-com after being this like gangster sort of film, right? Because
Yeah.
there's that like whole like we need to escape, and then suddenly there's all these women, and oh my god, the love, and then it brings it all like together.
Yeah, I think we have to discuss the use of the N-word in this film, just because it comes up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm just
obviously.
saying, like,
Have you not seen? Well, yeah.
yeah, again, like, it's the product of its time, but I guess because we're so sensitized to the word now, every time they used it, you're sort of like, ooh,
Oh, are we?
oh no,
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
was. I was like, ooh.
Well, I think it's because you haven't seen enough black films. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, but also
maybe.
kind of low key.
Yeah.
No, because like, no, I know what you mean because it is obviously the use of the N word, and like
It's now
such
kind
a
of taboo.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's not taboo. Well, yeah, it is taboo, but it's also like
Mm,
you say it, you're a racist, obviously.
yeah.
If you ever saw, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to defend the use of it. But I think yeah, like it is definitely a product of its time, and
Mm,
it's I don't find a problem like with it being used within a film. I think the
mm.
issue was just how society was back then, and
Yeah, I think
because
that's like what makes you cringe about it is when you hear it, you just think, oh yeah, that was normal.
that was normal. But I think
And that's what makes you uncomfortable about it.
it's yeah, no, you're right. It's uncomfortable, but I
Mm,
think it's also like good that it's there because I think it's better to like be reminded of those things and that
mm.
happened as opposed to being like, oh, that never happened.
Shying away from
Shying
it.
away from it, yeah.
Yeah.
I did appreciate that, and because it was such a film of its time, like even the idea of interracial marriage, because I thought that
Yeah.
was the most interesting thing about the film was that like they had only known each other for 10 days, and it's like we're getting married.
I know.
And it's like okay, but what I liked about it was that there's some justification for why the parents can disapprove that's not
Mm,
just related to the fact that they're
yeah.
both, interracial, but it's also you're rushing into this, there's a huge age gap, blah 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 blah. Like there's all these other layers that they could like use as well. Like it's not
Mm,
just you're white, he's black. This is a no. It's like there is that level, that layer in there, but there's also that like you don't really know him. Like you don't know each other. Blah like that could be like an argument that that they could make. Obviously they don't go
mm.
in that route, but it's like I think that was done for like the audience to think, well hang on, like they've only been together for like less than 2 weeks. Like is this even real love? And like even the way that what's his name, brother? The main actor, the main actor.
Sidney Poitier. His name is John in the film.
Oh yeah, John. Yeah.
John, yeah.
So oh yeah, because it's John and Joanne, is it?
Joanne, yeah.
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 And they call her something else, and I don't remember.
They
Anyway,
call
the
her
way
Joey.
Joey. I was
Yeah.
gonna say Joni. That's not Joni. Yeah, like with the way that John performs, I thought he was. I'm kind of skipping to actors here, but I thought he was the best actor in the film. Um, and then I think the best actress was the mum when I was watching it.
Catherine Hepburn.
Catherine
Yeah.
Hepburn, yeah, that's the name.
Yeah.
I think she won the Oscar for it, if I'm not
Yeah, I
mistaken.
think so.
Yeah, because that was the one thing I knew about this film as well, was that she won an Oscar for Best Actress, and then I watched it, it's like, oh yeah. I mean, it looks like she's literally gonna cry in every single scene.
She does cry a lot in this film.
Yeah, she does, but you could see like the sparkle tear in her eyes, and I'm just like, oh, she's gonna break down. And there with John, I thought he played his role pretty well, with the way that like those situations are played out. And I was kind of surprised by how open they were. I don't know why, but like if that makes sense, like how they were just like, oh yeah, John is just very uncomfortable because of the fact that you think that he's a Negro, blah blah blah, or like that you see him as this, and it's just like, oh wow, you just literally said it. Oh shit. So that sort of raises those like tensions with the family and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought the story was pretty. I think there were parts of it that could have picked up in pace. I think there were some parts that were fairly slow, not to the same degree as like North by Northwest, because that one takes place across a lot of time and a lot of different locations, whereas this one is like just this one house and the occasional street, obviously, when it cuts to like Joanne's dad, like her parents, like going out that one scene, which I sort of understand, but I also don't think it was needed. Anyway, yeah. Were there any other thoughts in terms of like the story and I guess the characters, because they're sort of entwined?
I will say, like, because you've kind of touched on the pacing, but like I felt very much like it happened almost in real time.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like,
yeah, well, it's all in one day
pacing.
too.
Yeah, but I feel like the sort of slightly slower pacing and the occasional redundant scene, like it's sort of, even though it's supposed to be over like several more hours than it actually was, like I really did get the impression that we were kind of moving at the same pace as the characters were, that it was sort of kept developing as we went. So I did kind of like that.
Yeah.
I like that too. It felt like we were invited to them.
Yeah. Like we were moving at the same pace as the characters were, which I quite liked.
Like, and Taki, I know the driving scene with the parents you didn't like, but I think that scene was done to show him that change can be good because of the ice cream scene.
That new can be good as well.
Yeah.
What, did I say I didn't like it?
I think you just like
you said you think you could take it out.
Oh yeah, doesn't mean I don't like it. I just think for time, if you had to cut something, you could cut that. Yeah, because like, well, no, I'm talking about the scene where they go and get the ice cream, and then he crashes into that other guy, who just so happens to be African American, and like I understand what the function is, but I thought that you didn't need to have that. But like, I don't hate it. I don't hate that scene. Like, I don't think there's a scene in here that I generally dislike, but at the same time there were like points in the film where like I feel like it could have almost all taken place at the house. Like I don't know if it needed to go away from the house at all, if that makes sense. That's just me though. Yeah. Oh, also, actually, sorry, I have to interrupt this. There was something I actually didn't like in the film, and well, it's not that I didn't like it, but I didn't know where it was going, because it kind of went nowhere. It was the one girl. Like, he gets into the house and he's like, oh, who's that? I forget her name now. And she's like, oh, she helps the maid sometimes. He's like, oh, wow.
I think it's Dorothy.
Dorothy, yeah, it started with a D. And then, like, she gets picked up by some guy, and then she leaves.
And never goes anywhere
else. And then she leaves. I was like, wait, what is this? Like, does this like literally take this character out of the film? What do you lose?
I'm going to argue this with you on this one.
Why? Why? What do you lose? What do you mean?
Okay.
What do you mean?
So for one, I found John being attracted to Dorothy kind of almost reiterating that the expectation is that a coloured person should be with a coloured person.
Okay.
That he's like sort of naturally inclined to like her more because she is like coloured.
Okay.
And that's why.
Okay.
He did it. And then the thing with the delivery guy, and her getting in the car, I kind of got that as the idea that like the younger generations were a lot more progressive about it.
But it's changed. I was like, that's exactly it. I got
the impression that sort of the teenagers of the time.
That's fine.
Were kind of starting to not care about the whole colour difference.
That's fine, but
he's got
do more with it. Don't just have
Okay.
them in 2 scenes for like 2 minutes and then leave the fucking film. At least have her come back and be like, oh, but times have changed. You know, instead of this old white guy who's like, I have accepted you now. Like, what would have been better is if this girl came back with the dude and she's like, oh, he's my boyfriend. And he's like, what? It's like, yeah, times are changing. That would have been a better way to do it. Not just, like, I get you, 100%. Like, that's cool. That's fine. But, like, I just feel like you could have done more with it. No, I was just so, because I was like, okay, she's setting up something. I was like, okay, we're building something with her. Because I saw her in this one scene, and then she popped up in another scene. I was like, okay, surely she'll come back in the end.
No.
No.
Like,
don't
I
get me
really
wrong,
like
I
where that was
didn't,
going because. I'm sorry, I was saying, I really like where that was going. They actually seem kind of cute and cool
I agree.
together, and I thought, okay, I actually want to see where this is going. They look cool, and it's going to be like a fun thing. And I was like, when I watched the second time, I'm like, I can't remember. Did this go somewhere? I hope it goes somewhere. They seem like two really cool characters, and I want to get to know more. And then I was like, no, it didn't go anywhere.
I thought,
I
thought they were
what it
gonna.
was done for.
Yeah. Okay, like
But
that's.
I was interested in both characters, but I wish we saw more from them. But I understand why they're in the film and what the scenes were. I agree. I do wish there was more.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like, watching the second watch through, I was like, man, can you imagine being the actor that plays a delivery boy in this? For one
I just want to dance. I just want to dance.
Yeah.
I want to be a dancer.
What a role!
I get what you're saying, but I don't think that's enough.
Yeah,
I just don't think that's like. Sure, you can have. Like, I understood why he, had that. At first, I thought that was weird. I thought like, well, you've got a girlfriend.
It is a
What
bit of
the
an
hell?
odd step.
That was the first. Like, when I first saw, it, I was like, oh, okay. You saying that's
I
that
also
whole.
was weirded out by that.
Yeah, but you saying to me now about the whole attraction thing, I'm like, okay, I can sort of see that. But at the same time, it's. I think for me is the way that they shot it. It was like, who's that? Zoom into her. She's an important thing. She'll come up later. Like that was just it. Like for me, and like that idea that like times are changing and the progression of society through the younger generation. Oh fuck, that's mean. Like that's actually a good point to drive home. And just as you guys were saying it, I'm like, they could have just brought that in the end. Because the way that I saw the ending, I guess we'll skip to the ending. Spoilers. I've already spoiled it 3 times. But it's just... I thought it was quite... I guess it sort of fit the film, but it was quite cheesy how he, like... he's, like, staring out into the distance, and the camera, like, cranes up into his face, and he's just like... My God, and then turns around. He's had this big revelation about... Like... I mean, it becomes like a nice moment in the end because obviously it had to end with them all at the dinner table, all having accepted this relationship, which is like, yeah, that's the only way it sort of has to end, I think, through the ways in which they like establish the characters, especially like the father of Joanne, who I forget his name. I think he passed away before this film was released or something. Yeah, or like after, I'm not too sure, but like, it was like 17 days after it, or something like that, I don't know, I could be incorrect, that's my gimmick, I'm always wrong. Yeah, sorry, Lance, you go.
No, I was thinking, and speaking about like scenes and stuff, how, I didn't expect that scene, how intense was that scene where John talked to his father?
Oh, I love that scene.
Oh my God, that scene was hilarious.
That was great.
I was like, that was fantastic. I was like, that was intense. I did not expect that. Even the second time, I was like, how did I forget that scene? That scene is intense AF.
Yeah, that's why I like that actor in that role, because that scene was like that was it. That was the Oscar scene, I thought.
I found that like I guess you guys found that really enjoyable. I found that kind of cringy. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh really? Interesting.
Yeah, just the way he's like, get off my back, and I was like, oh God, it's a child arguing, like a teenager arguing with their parents, like.
I just love how Milan's just like silence, just like fuck, bro?
I just found it like he sort of doesn't have a particularly strong argument at that point. He's just sort of rambling, and then he's just like, "Get off my back!" And I was like, "Okay."
Like, there's no argument. What are you talking
Well,
about?
I mean, like he
The
just.
dad's trying to control his life, and he's
Yeah,
like,
I know.
"You're trying to control my life, Dad. Get off my." What do you mean? It's like, you know what? That's no justification. Like, you've got no stand here, man. He controls your life. What do you mean?
I don't understand. Make it make sense, Vic. Please.
Like it just like the way that speech was delivered, for me, when he sort of argues with him, although his points are valid. It very much to me sounded sort of like, you know, like teenagers when they go through that rebellious phase, you know, like, you don't own my life, you don't control me. And I was like, he's 37 in this film.
You mean like he's overacting?
Yeah, it was a little overacting for me. So he was like, "You've got to get off my back!" And I was like, "Oh god, I'm laughing. I shouldn't be laughing, but I'm laughing." Like, it was just a little too much.
I thought there was a lot of vindication in his performance, especially in that scene.
You know,
I thought it was...
I'm definitely with you, Lance. I don't know what Vic is.
Yeah, I'm in the minority.
Vic's the fucking... Vic is our friend at Weathering with You. You're the Weathering with You guy. That's who you are now, Vic. Laughing at this, like, important thing. No, like...
I'm sorry, I just couldn't.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah. No, definitely. Like, I... totally, no, I'm with Lance on this one. With, like... Like, I think the reason why I'm in that space is because throughout a lot of the film, he's, like, kept his composure for most of it. And, like, he's like, you know, "Oh, your parents won't accept me, blah, blah, blah." And he's, like, all calm and collected. And, like, every time he's with his parents or talking to his parents, there's, like, all of these, like, breakdowns of his character. Or, like, he's talking in a different cadence. He's like, his body language changes. Even when he sees his parents, he's just like, "Oh, now I know you guys, you know, will have words, blah, blah, blah." And then, like, you know, with his dad, he just sort of, there's that explosion, you know? Obviously, you can disagree with how they executed that. That's totally fair. But, yeah, nah, I think that was, like, one of the best parts of it for me. For a different reason to you, but yeah.
Did everyone find the priest funny?
Yes.
Yeah, the priest was very funny.
The priest was cool, I thought.
Yeah, I also thought that he was the only function he served was to be the guy that was like, "Oh yeah, I agree with this marriage. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. This is all good." Like, that's like, he's that, like, progressive character.
You say that, but I found him really interesting when you look at the fact that he's sort of the opposite for Hillary, the assistant.
Yes, no, that's what I mean. Yeah, so he's that, and then the fucking... Is that her name? The maid?
Hillary, yeah. My notes just say Hillary gets owned, so I know it's Hillary.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what scene that is too. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I actually quite like that. I like that there was some sort of outside opinions sort of weighing in. You know, I really like that they had these two sort of outside opinions, and the way that they worked conflicted. So, like, you have the mother who's for it, and then her friend who's against, and then you have the father who's against, and his friend that's for it. Like, I quite like that there was that constant sort of conflict and discussion that having those two characters created.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you said, like Catherine Hepburn was fantastic in this film, but that scene by the car with Hillary was
so good.
It was just great.
I will say, just like on like an off tangent for what we've been talking about, but like, I feel like this film was way more theater than North by Northwest.
Yeah.
There was so many, and I'm not saying that as a negative thing, but like, just the way that the cinematography worked, there was a lot of 2 shots, 3 shots, which is like all these characters in just this one little frame, and then the camera would like follow them as they move, as opposed to cutting to singles. And like, one of the more interesting visual scenes I thought was interesting was when the Katharine Hepburn and the dad, they were both in the bathroom, and he's shaving and he's drinking at the same time.
Quite good.
Yeah, it was really good because there's like 2 cuts in it. I think 2 or 3 cuts.
Mm.
But it's literally them 2 in the mirror, and then it'll pan over to like show him grabbing a drink or grabbing his toothpaste or whatever, and then it'll go back to them. And then there's this one moment where it slides across from the mirror to Catherine, and it's like this over the shoulder, and I was like, oh my god, this is like they've like perfectly staged this to be like this fluid changing of 3 shots without cutting. And then like I was like, okay, I'm watching this, and they keep panning over to the toothpaste and the beer, and I'm just like, they must be doing this for a reason. And the payoff is obviously that he puts the toothpaste in the drink, and I was like, oh my god, that's so good. Like, this is definitely like my version of like the crop duster scene. Just like that. That was probably my favorite one. Just like the way it did all that from like start to finish. That was like my tangent. Also with how scenes go on for like quite a long time, and actors are just there to act in the scene. You know, they just let them go for long periods. So I thought I appreciated that, and that sort of more harkens back to like the theatre method of staging.
I really liked Joanne or Joey's characterization.
Very bubbly.
Yeah, like the moment you first see her, she's in this bright yellow coat.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that too. Like a lot of the color palette in this, she's wearing a lot of bright clothing for most of it. She
and then
wears
you get
green
John,
at the
who's in
end
this
too.
sort of very dark suit the whole time. So you've got that sort of he's reserved and she's out there kind of aesthetic.
And that also works with like their characterization as well, because she's just like this mind of like, I don't give a fuck, like, you know what, and like even like that phone call scene when she's like, oh yeah, come to dinner, and then he's just like, what are you doing? Like, I told them you were colored, and she's like, oh, what does that matter? That doesn't matter. Who cares? And it's sort of this like almost this sense of like optimism and almost like naivety as well, with what the situation is. But even though it's like a little bit optimistic and a little bit naive, she's also like, I felt like she was also well aware of like what everyone was thinking. Just because like when scenes would go on, they're like, oh, how was your flight? Oh yeah, no, it was good. Oh yeah. Oh, how was your flight? Oh yeah, no, it was good. 40 minutes or 400 miles. And then like she would pop up and she would just like point out the awkwardness, which I thought was like really interesting. You know, she would just be like, oh yeah, like my parents, I don't think they're gonna agree with this, blah blah blah, because you're black. It's like stuff that like the audience are like they're thinking, and she just sort of verbalizes it, just like, oh yeah, this is why this scene is awkward. And I just thought, oh, it's really interesting that you do that to that character, because then often in like a traditional role or like a different role, that character would be like the more naive, like not know what's going on. Is like, why are you so angry? What do you mean? You know. But like she's obviously, she knows what's happening, and she knows the situation, and so but despite that, she's like got this like bubbly personality and attitude. And he's just this reserved 37-year-old guy. Oh yeah. So when I also was watching it, and they brought up his backstory, I was scared that was also not going to come up like the Dorothy thing. But for me, I felt that worked out better than the Dorothy thing, obviously. Like his whole like the whole, he was married before and then he had a son that died. Like I thought that was good. At first I didn't, because I'm like, okay, where's this going? Like so far they haven't mentioned his past. Why is this important? Like, and like I think that adds another layer to his character, that like, because there's that scene where he's outside with his mum and he's just like, you know, I never thought I'd find love again. I found love 8 years ago, but like I lost it. Oh no, I lost love 8 years ago because that's when they died. And it's like I didn't know I'd feel this way again. So like that sort of emphasizes how powerful his love is for her, for Joey, and I thought, okay, I feel like that is like a justifiable thing because it's also a very traumatic like event.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that's, I don't know. What did you guys think about his backstory? The fact that he was like that he had this past life and like now he's here. Like also the sound is back.
Yeah, I think. I think it made him more a sympathetic character, and it shows you that. I think it's kind of like a way to show that to us, like, yeah, 10 days is rushed, but to a guy who he blocked off his heart for 8 years and then fell in love after 10 days, this must be real. You know? I think it was the only way you could make the 10 days feel justified in a way. Or one of the only ways. I'm sure there's other ways to make 10 days feel justified, but to me, that was probably one of the bigger reasons why the 10 days felt it could be justified.
What do you think, Vic?
Like, I have to say, for the time period, the whole 10 days thing is not so unheard of. Like, obviously, to us, that's like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, that's ridiculous. But to them, this kind of thing wasn't so insane. Like, for the time period, it's still a little rushed, but it's nowhere near the kind of, okay, what the hell are you doing levels that we sort of have from it. So I just thought I'd point out that, like, while it's still fast, by their standards, like, they, at the time, they really did believe, like, once you found the person you were supposed to be with, that was it. You know, like, most people didn't have many boyfriends or girlfriends before they got married.
I think it's interesting that you say that as well. Because there's that scene where they're with their friends, and they're like, oh, we lived together for 2 years before we even got married. So I thought that was like the filmmaker's way of saying that what they're doing was uncommon. But it's interesting that you say that like that was a common thing because then because then adding in that scene is specifically to tell the audience like how different their relationship is to like another couple that could, you know, and how different relationships are. Like if that's not how it was seen as the common.
You see that? You say that though, but then when the mum's ironing her shirts and she says, "How long did it take you to fall in love with Dad?" and she goes, "Well, nowhere near as long as 20 minutes."
Falling in love and marriage is different. No, because the couple they were together for 2 years, right? And they like lived together, and it's like, but they didn't get married. I think is what I'm trying to say is like that legal, like sure, like the mum, she's like faster than 20 minutes, like fell in love with your dad, whatever. But they never specify like when they got married, which is like, this is the difference between like falling in love versus marriage. Whereas this couple have like brought it together like so hard, you know, like John and Joey, they're like, oh, we're in love, let's get married. The different couple, oh, we're in love, let's be together 2 years and then get married. Like it's just interesting that they introduced the point of difference, you know, in the film. Not saying that like getting married so fast is uncommon, but I think it's interesting that they added that in. Like they didn't have to add a couple that took 2 years to marry. It's almost like creating a counterpoint to John and Joey's relationship, and almost telling the audience that maybe even the audience should rethink how we see the couple. And I think that's like the primary function of what that's meant to try and drive home. But yeah, no, it's super interesting. I'm glad we're talking about this film now because I have a lot more fresh memories. Fucking Dorothy, man, holy shit. Oh my god. When you guys were like, I'm gonna argue this, I'm just like, you fucking what, mate? I was like, alright then. But no, like that's...
I sort of skipped over John's tragic past. I think it was really because, I think it was sort of because of how old he is. You definitely would have thought that he'd have had like a wife and children, and probably you would have thought something was sort of wrong with him if he hadn't.
Mm.
But then at the same time, they didn't want to make him so, I guess, sort of uncouth as to be divorced.
Mm.
So I sort of got that as their way of being like, he's a great guy, and obviously there's nothing wrong with him.
Yeah.
He just but he needs to be single for this movie to exist, so we're gonna have to kill him off.
So,
you know?
So I may be wrong,
Okay.
but like, did the process, or I guess, did the idea of divorce, was that like a very stigmatized thing back then?
It wasn't amongst the very upper classes, but it still was uncommon. Or it still was considered sort of a, ooh, you know, like I think because divorce back in the day was kind of seen as the failure of a marriage.
Exactly, yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, so, like, you could even argue that, like, the filmmakers, like, purposely avoided that because they didn't want to have this character be like, this guy failed in a marriage, so then, like, you know, he's gonna fail. Yeah,
so there was still stigma around getting divorced. Like, there were definitely people that did it, and sometimes there were, you know, people who had wealth would get divorced because it was fashionable to have a different woman on your arm. But yeah, definitely amongst sort of the middle and the lower classes, depression? The fuck did that come from? Divorce was still seen as quite like you failed. One of you must have done something wrong. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they didn't want to make him divorced just because it makes it look like he did something wrong. He failed. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And considering the fact that they're like building him up as this highly successful person. Yeah, like he's just like, he's financially well off, he's got this high paying job, he's been all over the world. Do you know how important this man is? Like, literally. They even say, like, do you know how important he is? Holy shit.
Yeah, I want to bring up a scene because I really want your opinion on it. But when the dad is on the phone trying to get the dirt from the assistant, and the assistant starts listing off all the achievements, if you watch the mother's reaction, I found that really interesting.
Well, she was quite happy, wasn't she?
Yeah, like she just starts beaming.
Yeah, yeah, literally, that's the only thing I looked at too. I didn't even know what the dad thought at the time. Yeah, because she was
she's
sort
just
of
so great, man.
Yeah, she's a good actor, eh? Like you just sort of
fantastic. That she deserved that Oscar, man.
Yeah, she like draws your gaze, you know, like, and yeah, no, I 100% agree that like becomes. I feel like that was like even the turning point of her character being like, oh my god, she's dating a really great guy. Like, I'm so happy for her. Because obviously when she first gets introduced to him, it's this big shock. And like she has to like process it, which I think was like a good way to like try and justify the parents' decision making, because they say like, we just got sprung by this, like we need more time to think, which I think in that like given situation I think is fair. You know, not just, you know, with the whole accepting them, but like just, you know, product of its time. It's like, you know, you can't expect them to be accepting of like that sort of lifestyle, because they even, like, a lot of characters even say like, I didn't even think this would happen, like I didn't think about this, so then what do we do? And there obviously there's no real, actually no, there was this one thing that I kind of didn't know how to feel, which was John's dad. Like, for me, he came off very hostile and unlikable, and he almost felt very villainous a lot. As opposed to Joanne's dad, who we've spent the entire movie watching his thought process and like watching this development and then coming to his conclusion. Like, I don't know how to feel that the other dad was just sort of painted as this like guy that's just like, he's 100% with Joey's dad, but he also doesn't have, like, we don't get to see what his thought process was, and he's just like this. He just felt very two-dimensional, and like just sort of one note. And it's like, I don't know how to feel about them having the black character's dad be like in this sort of rejecting position. I don't know.
I found that interesting in some ways though, because like I think he sort of is in the same mindset as the maid Tilly.
Yes.
And like there were definitely, because with the time that this film is set, you are starting to get, you know, there's a change coming that black people aren't supposed to be second-class citizens and that they aren't. Yeah, so we're really starting to get to the sort of real civil rights movement for people of color. And what came with that, surprisingly, is a lot of people of color who didn't want that to be happening, that sort of thought they were troublemakers or that they should stay in their lane and accept the sort of position that they've been brought to be in. And so I guess that's what I got from the dad as well as the maid, was sort of this idea that there were people of colour who were contented with where they stood and what they had, and they didn't want people to stir up trouble and then for the, you know, their race to lose even more of the privileges that they'd fought so long to get hold of. You know? So I just thought the dad was sort of in that boat.
I totally understand that, and I think that's a very valid point. But I also think the way that this film like portrayed them and executed that was in a way that painted them very negatively, where I think that they could have been done like
better.
like in a more nuanced way that didn't have them be the bad guys, because that's sort of what I came out of it feeling like. The maid's a dick, the dad's a dick. Obviously the mum was fine because she was like,
the mom was,
you know,
she was cool, I think.
Yeah, like there was a point where like, you know, they literally did that, the whole that both the mums were like accepting of it, both the dads were rejecting it, right? And I was like, okay, that's fine. That's obviously what they're trying to go for. And then the other guy, I forget his name, the really funny one, like he's accepting of it, and then the priest, and then you know the maid's rejecting it, and it's like all these clear, like they're very clear positions, and it's like they're not too complicated, right? Except for maybe I think the white parents were the most complicated ones, because the mum starts out very shocked but then comes to accept it, and then the dad has this whole journey, and then he looks out to the stars, and then he suddenly realizes I'm not racist, and then walks back and has his whole speech. But then I don't know, because I'm just torn between the idea that like that John's parents were, or at least his dad was just like purely just this rejection and nothing else. Because like when John does his whole like speech to him, like he just sort of turns around and leaves the room. And then even when the Joey's dad does the whole speech, he sort of gets up, and the dad looks like he's still disapproving, but he's like, oh whatever, I'm just gonna have dinner now. Like it's just like, I don't know, I felt like maybe it would have been too unrealistic if they all accepted them, but like you could have done that in a way that made them not so like, I don't know what the word is. They just feel like bad guys or like assholes, and I'm just like, you don't have to make them assholes. Like I think, yeah.
I mean, but for the dad and mom, they only had 2 hours, right, for John's mom and dad to get acquainted. So I think the mom was by far the fastest transition to accepting, which made her like the most accepting character, John's mom especially. But John's dad, was just, he only 2 hours to really accept it. And he felt a certain way, especially because, as you know, like he was talking about how hard he worked and stuff. He's like, I didn't work this hard for my son to be like this. And yeah, it's just a fair thing. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
Actually, no. When you bring that up, that's interesting. Like how he's, because he does say that like to John, where he's just like, oh, I worked so hard to get you where you are, and he's like, you know, I paid for all you, like I gave you an easy life. I went through a really struggling life, and now you're giving it all back to them. So no, I can kind of see that. But then of course John does that counterpoint by like, I don't owe you anything. Like it was your job because I was your child, which I do sort of agree, because then you'll have this endless debt to your parents, and that's like not. You know, like sure you can like repay your parents in the future, but like I'm fucking 37. Like get off my back. Yeah. No, that's interesting, brother. Yeah. I guess that is true, that they didn't have enough time to process it. But I guess for me, I guess in an ideal world I would have liked to have more complexity with all the characters, because at the moment it's just all the white characters get all the complex parts, which again is a part of the time, obviously. Like it's not going to be like Get Out where all the interesting characters are like everybody, because there is no sort of segregation there. Okay, I want to talk about the ending now. So the ending, I think I've already talked about many times, but like again, I was just like, okay, I can kind of get why they gave the dad the big, because the way that I saw the ending was, it was literally the filmmakers talking to the audience about accepting interracial relationships, interracial marriage. Yeah. Like, literally they're telling us to, come to accepting it, and that it's going to be really hard, and that, it's going to be a rough journey, but if you love each other, you're going to endure. And I'm like, that's a good message. That's, especially for the time, it was probably like a great message. That's fine. And again, it's all part of the time, but it's just like, I kind of take issue with that coming from, like, an old white guy. I don't know.
You mean it might inherently be racist that it's the white man telling them?
Yeah, or like, I don't know if racist is the right term, but it's just like, it could be problematic. Then, like, more problematic than, like, because it didn't become, like, a dialogue between them. It just became, oh yes, I've come to accept you now, so therefore, because I've accepted you, this is the happy ending. Like, because I've accepted you, not anyone else. Fuck if your dad doesn't accept you, I'll accept you. The black dad doesn't matter, like this. That's just sort of how I felt when I was watching it. I'm just like, I know what you're trying to do, and it's like, yeah, I get it, but also, like, but also, this is what you're, I'm not trying to say that like the white dad is evil or that he's bad for doing it. Like, I think the characters themselves are all, like, I think their character is quite good. I'm just saying, like, the way that the filmmakers decided to use him as this vessel for, like, spreading this positive message and, like, trying to do all that through him, I think was what I took, like, issue with. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if you guys felt the same way or if you felt differently to the ending. I think that's what I really want to know, is if you guys even picked up on that at all, if you just thought, well, what a happy ending. Which is fair enough if you do. Like, that's totally fine, because I think that's what they were going for anyway. But, like, yeah, did you guys have any, like, thoughts on that?
Like, I feel the ending couldn't have gone much different, since during, like, close to the beginning, John gave him basically all the power in his marriage. I feel like it couldn't have ended any other way, really.
You mean because of how John gave him, like, he said, hey, you need to decide if you accept us, otherwise I'm out.
Yeah.
So I don't think it could have gone much different. But, like, I mean,
I sort of got the final message to be, like, don't give a damn what society says about it. Like, if you love each other, you love each other. Like the dad says, it's none of our business, really, if we approve or not.
Yes.
But I do agree with Taki that there probably could have been a bit more nuance in the way it was delivered, because it does come across as white man tells them that they can do it, and now they can do it.
Yeah, exactly. See, that idea of, like, you don't have to, like, you're like, we don't have to accept you for you to accept yourselves. But it's also the dad who he was trying to get that acceptance from, who's telling him that. Whereas, like, if he just got up and said, you know what, I love your daughter, I don't give a damn, like, what you think. I'm gonna love her forever. And if the dad was like, alright, yeah, that's cool, let's have dinner. You know, like, then it's more... Yeah, because just, like, the dad had so much of a say of it all. And, like, I do agree that, like, I think, like, definitely he needed to accept them in the end. Like, that needed to happen. But it's just, like, the way that they delivered that message is what I take issue with. But, like, the actual message itself is fine, and all the character stuff is fine, but then, it's just all that stuff. Yes, so with that, are there any other points that people wanted to bring up?
Tully, the maid, she's a bit scary, yeah.
They even had that...
Quite...
They even had that, that Dutch angle, if you guys remember that, where, like, she's literally threatening, John.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, was he, like, half naked or something?
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting scene. Yeah, he wasn't even that good looking. Because, like, even the camera gets on this Dutch angle where it's, like, tilted to the side, and it's, like, almost to throw him, like, off balance by this sort of, like, what the fuck? And, like, yeah, so, like, I thought that was quite interesting as well. And even, like, yeah, character, I think, Vic, you picked up a lot of good points about her being in her position and the idea of, like, not wanting to change that status, which can almost seem as, like regressive as opposed to progressive. And, like, maintaining that, like, status quo of, like, that hierarchy, which is very interesting. She kind of reminded me a little bit of Samuel L. Jackson's character from Django, but not to that degree, obviously, because he was, like, insane.
No, I think you definitely get the impression that she doesn't want the boat rocked because she feels like she's earned the position she has and she doesn't want to lose it. You know, that sort of sense of we should be grateful for what we have.
Yeah, and I think that
and there were a lot of people that thought that way.
Exactly. Like, I think that's almost, like, reflective of the time and, like, how most people thought about it. And then what this film tries to do is give the audience of that time, like, another way to think about it.
I think also, though, like, if I might, like, I think from that scene you talked about when he's getting dressed, like, she sort of gets the impression that he's only marrying a white girl because it'll bring him prestige.
Which is interesting because...
So, like, I guess that I got the impression from that scene that she thinks, like, oh, he's really just playing her. And so she is kind of like the mother figure being like, no, don't you dare. You know, like, yeah, you want something out of this. You don't actually love her. You're here because money and, you know, ability and marrying into a white family.
And it's interesting because she's almost, like, reinforcing those stereotypes around African Americans, because it's like, she's like, I know you, you're my kind, and our kind is bad. But it's like, whoa. It's like, it's almost like it's played off like that, because she's like, the only one that's super suspicious of him, and like you said, like this protective mother figure for Joey, and like, you know, she's watching out for her, and then it's also like this. I mean, there's also other things as well, like obviously he's a lot older, so it's like a sexual predator kind of thing. And it's like, all you want is this, and all you want is money. But the interesting thing about the whole chasing the wealth thing is that, like, I'm fairly sure he's a lot more well off than she would be, considering his occupation and, like, all of that. Obviously through, like, work and stuff, he would be a lot more up there. But,
I think, like, she doesn't know that, though, you know?
That's what I mean. Like, she thinks this, but we know that's not the case. But she's still, like reinforcing those stereotypes.
That's what I find, like, when you add that to the dad sort of being negative about it, and then you have the white dad at the end being like, yes, you sort of almost get this
Mm.
underlying sort of blacks are bad still. And you're like,
Yes,
"Ooh, that's a bit
yes,
of a weird thing
yes.
to put
That's
into the film.
no, yes. That's why I was so like I didn't know how to feel about the dad and Tilly because I'm just like they're kind of treated like they're bad and like all the white ones are like good. But then it's like,
yeah.
I
I guess you have Hillary though, so like not all the white ones are good.
I guess
Hillary's
so.
the worst.
I guess so. That's the one bad one.
Yeah.
But like again, it's because you could almost say like Dorothy was a good one, but like wow, she fucking fucked off.
I think I'm gonna go against the grain this time, so I would like you guys to go first if you don't mind.
All right, Vic, you can go first.
Oh, that's an interesting question. What do I give it? Would I watch it again? No. Sorry, Lance. I've seen it twice now, and I've seen it enough. I'm gonna have to give it a solid 6.
6
Closer
out of
to
10.
a 5 than a 7.
Oh, closer to a 5 than a 7.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So I really rattled my head around this one, guys. I really did. Because I definitely think North by Northwest is a better film than this one.
Yeah, that's fair.
By far. I guess I kind of talked myself into the score.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think the film itself is fine.
Yeah.
Like, I think the film itself is fine, and I think the subject matter and the way it treats it is fine.
There's a lot of fine going on, yes.
But it's very problematic with how it treats some of its subject matter. But in saying that, a lot of the technical, or like the technicalities and the performances of it are like very well done and impressive to me. That it's like it's a mixture between like the actual like what is the political statement it's making versus how well is this made as a film. And so because of that, I'm also gonna give it a 6. And it's not like a 7 or 5, it's like straight up just a 6.
It's 6.
Because I don't think I could push it higher or sink it lower. Like,
Okay.
so I'm like a solid 6 because a lot of the things that we've been talking about sort of counteract each other. And so, you know, I think because of that, it's not a 5 by any means, because it does a lot of things well enough that I think it doesn't deserve a 5. But I think 6 for me is the one we're going with.
Yep.
So Lance?
And for your boy, like, yeah, I mean, I gotta say, like, I mean, for it's critically acclaimed, it's got its Oscars, it's served a massive purpose in its time. And I still think, even though it doesn't translate the best today, it still translates well enough that I could probably recommend to someone else that may be a little more sensitive, even if they're a little more sensitive to the subject matter.
Yeah.
So, because of its impact, the fact that I actually enjoyed the film, and I thought it accomplished what it was trying to say, and its accolades, of course, I'm going to give it an 8.
An 8?
Oh, nice. A big old 8.
It comes out at a 6.66, which we're going to have to round to a 7.
That definitely rounds to a 7.
This is going to come up to 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I like the fact that the group score has listed both North by Northwest and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner at a 7. To 7 each.
Even though I definitely think North by Northwest is the better film.
I also agree. Yeah, interesting. That is very interesting. I have disagreed with both of your scores and both of your films. Because Vic, you chose North by Northwest, and my score's different to yours. And then Lance, you chose this one, mine's different to yours.
Different to yours,
Yeah. And with that, friends, family, and whānau, that concludes episode 2 of the Waifu Clubhouse podcast. Thank you guys again for joining us, and please join us again in 2 weeks when we discuss 2 very unique and critically acclaimed films, Tarzan and 12 Angry Men. Thank you guys, ka kite anō, and have a lovely evening.